Hi all, and welcome back to another episode of Efficio's Transforming Public Procurement Microcast series, where we'll continue to help you better understand key elements of the new Procurement Act regulations. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Ed King, a consultant within our public sector practice, to talk about key changes to the open procedure. Welcome, Ed. So what's changed with the open procedure under the new Act?
Hi, Jack. Thanks for inviting me on. It's great to be on the series. So yes, just to give a brief background firstly, the open procedure remains a single stage procedure with no restriction on who can submit tenders. All information needs to be provided at the point of tender and is made available to all suppliers.
Okay, then thanks for that. So what about exclusion grounds?
Yes, so to be clear, exclusion grounds must be considered prior to assessing tenders. Now, a key change is that there's no longer a requirement to set conditions of participation or selection criteria as they are previously known. However, where conditions of participation are set and a supplier fails to meet them, then you're not obliged to consider the tender any further and the supplier must not be awarded the contract.
Thanks, Ed. So can you tell us a little bit about the timescales then?
Sure, so here again, there's a few changes. The timescales for determining how long a supplier has to submit its tender, known as the tendering period, have now reduced. So it's now 25 days where tenders are submitted by electronic means, 10 days where a qualifying planned procurement notice has been published, and 10 days in a state of urgency where any other minimum timescale is impractical. And for clarity, the tendering period means the period beginning with the day after the day on which a contracting authority invites the submission of tenders as part of a competitive tendering procedure and ending with the day by which tenders must be submitted.
Okay, thanks. That's clear. So what about the tender notice for an open procedure? Any changes there?
Sure. So under the new Act, the tender notice is still used to invite suppliers to submit a tender under the open procedure and must be published prior to commencing the process. It'll include things like the subject matter and estimated contract value, how the tenders will be assessed, including any conditions of participation and the award criteria, the timescales for both the procurement process and delivery of requirements, and then any other relevant information. In addition, to follow the thread of transparency, contracting authorities must now also provide the following things in the tender notice: the reasons why a preliminary market engagement notice was not published if preliminary market engagement had been carried out, the justification for not awarding a contract in lots, despite it being reasonable and appropriate for doing so, and confirmation that a conflicts assessment has been undertaken.
Thanks, Ed. So just finally, what about modifications in the open procedure now?
Yeah, so the terms of an open procedure can be modified up until the tender deadline, and this may include changes to the requirements or specification, conditions of participation, and award criteria.
Thanks, Ed. That's a really great overview of the open procedure and key changes under the new Act. I hope you all enjoyed today's microcast. As always, please do post any thoughts or questions in the chat and get in touch with Ed or myself for future topics you want to hear about. We'll see you all next week.